Thank you very much, Jan Jenisch from Lafarge-Holcim, and a warm welcome to all of you to our next panel on the future of energy. My name is Inga Michler. I'm economics correspondent at Die Welt, and I'm happy to guide you through our next debate on how to meet the growing demand for energy while still protecting the environment. We have three wonderful guests on our panel who represent all the layers of the energy system. A warm welcome to Dr. Markus Krebber, CFO of RWE, who represents the production of energy. As you all know, RWE is a major power producer in Germany and Europe, and the company itself is in the middle of a transition from coal and nuclear energy to renewable energy sources. And RWE are building huge offshore wind farms and solar plants, among others. Our second piece to the puzzle today is Dr. Karsten Wildberger, CEO of E.ON and a major energy network provider in Europe. He brings power to industries and households, also tailoring consumer solutions, whether it's solar panels on the roofs, gas turbines, or smart home solutions. So a warm welcome to you too. And the third person on our panel is Tim Steinmetz, and he is the Chief Growth Officer of GridX and represents, so to say, the small fish in the pond. GridX is a growing company, since they have a growth officer, has 40 employees today, and is delivering energy management systems which can help us to make better use of existing networks. Maybe, Tim, you could start by giving us a graphic examples of what your devices can do.
Sure. Thank you, Inga. First of all, thanks for having me on this panel. It's really a pleasure. So a graphic example, I think that the easiest is to start with our grid box, which is the device which we are installing in the field. It has the size of my hand approximately, and we install it on residential homes or on commercial buildings, for example, to integrate, connect, and control EV charging stations, PV modules, battery storages, heating rods, etc. So everything which consumes or produces or stores energy or electricity basically, to be able to optimize energy flows and save money and costs in the end.
So can I, as a private consumer, buy such a box and you install it and all my energy flows go more smoothly and more efficiently then?
Indeed, yes. So we take care that you as a private customer, that you can integrate products from different hardware manufacturers. For example, a different manufacturer from the PV side and the battery side. We connect it with each other and increase the self-sufficiency of your home by over 15%. So you save money in the end and you have one integrated device where you can see your energy flows and make your preferences.
Mm-hmm. Just to make things more imaginable, what does the device do exactly? Can I imagine like I have an electric car in my garage and the device finds that there's surplus energy in the middle of the night and it's been loaded then rather than in the morning when everybody takes a shower and energy is needed elsewhere? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that's definitely one very important part. I think the first part is that we are kind of translator. So nowadays, all these different hardware assets in the field speak different languages. So there's not much of communication standards at the moment. So we have to translate them to one language. And if we have all the data, all the information in one language, we can shift it from left to right, from up to down, from the morning to the noon and to the evening, just to ensure that you use most of your renewable produced electricity in the end.
And Tim, if I understand things right, you already do have a cooperation with E.ON, but you also said previously that things could go faster with the big fish in the pond. What do you think they could do to speed things up, to go faster on the path of the green revolution there?
Yeah, actually, I think you always have to see that in relationship. So my opinion is that in different industries, you have large companies, enterprises, and some of them are opening up very fast and are agile and open for innovation and trying new products. And I think that E.ON belongs to this front runners, so to speak. And you have followers, which you have to motivate to follow early and to adopt early. So I think E.ON is definitely on the good side there. But of course, we wouldn't be a startup if we wouldn't say it could go faster. I mean, it would be ridiculous. So in the end, it's always, you're always doing business between people. And I think when you work together very closely, transparently, and have a very transparent focus on increasing performance and increasing the speed to bring innovative, smart energy products to different customer groups, then E.ON and us will be very successful, I think.
So Markus Krebber from RWE, let's look into how fast things can go. What is your guess? I mean, when or if at all, can we have 100% of our energy that is needed and consumed in Germany provided from green energy sources?
I think that's a very challenging question, Inga, but I'm happy to take it. First of all, I agree with Tim that things can always be faster, and we are all a bit impatient and know exactly what needs to be done. But then you have to convince more or less many stakeholders to get it all together. I think we have to take the broader picture. Do we talk about energy or do we talk about power, so electricity? I think on the electricity side, we are at the forefront of the change because we have clear technology which will definitely bring us to 100% renewable energy world by solar and wind. And we need both pieces. I mean, what Tim was talking about, the decentral part, but we also need massive central production when we think about huge offshore wind farms, but also utility scale solar and onshore wind production. I think for the utility side, it's pretty obvious that we have the technology. Where it will definitely be more difficult to answer the question is for the other sectors. Transportation and heating also have a basis by electrification, but when we think about the energy intensive industry, and we just heard someone from the cement and raw material side, it's much more difficult to replace carbon-based feedstocks by CO2 neutral feedstocks. I think we have with green hydrogen at least an idea, but to answer the question today, how long it takes, whether we're going to be there with 2040 or 2050, or it takes even longer, is very difficult from today's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Maybe just look into the electricity side. Will we, for a long while or forever maybe, depend on the import of electricity through wind and solar factories that are outside of Germany?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, yes, I don't think so. I think we can clearly meet the demand for green electricity in Europe by European production. I think where we definitely will rely on imports is when we also want to decarbonize the transportation sector, or when you talk about aviation. So synthetic carbon-free fuels, there we don't have enough space in Europe to produce it ourselves. But within the electricity area, I think I'm pretty obvious that by 2040, we have a clear path to, I mean, a very fast full decarbonization of the utility space.
Mm-hmm. Let's get Karsten into the discussion. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the loose ends on the point of view of a network provider. So what are the missing links so far for the green revolution on your side?
Yes, thanks, Inga. I'm happy to do so. Before that, let me just give you my point of view on the previous discussion. I think when we talk about how fast can this change happen, it's important when we talk about energy to talk about all the sectors. So electricity is one sector, and I think it will fall absolutely short when we think of the necessary actions from a climate change perspective. And there are different scenarios. If you take the Paris Climate Accord till 2040, 2050, reduction of 90% of CO2 emission or greenhouse gas emissions. This is a massive undertaking. If I just take Europe from 1990 till today, we've reduced it by 25%. With the current debate in the European Commission aiming at 60% reduction, that means 30 to 35% extra has to be delivered in 10 years. So the next decade, I think, will be very decisive about making it And I think we don't have a chance. And as Markus said, the technology is there. And what is needed from a network perspective, we will see a huge increase of decentral assets, generators, users that all need to get connected to the grid. And this grid needs to manage a very complex system in real time. So I would say the intelligence of the energy system in the future is embodied in the grid. And this is where the investment needs to happen. And what we need is a real huge investments to cover that from a generation perspective, from a grid perspective, from a user perspective. We also need to have the regulatory framework that allows digitization. And I think we need to also reduce bureaucracy so that we can actually accelerate faster. And I'm with Tim that we need to be fast. And I think reduced bureaucracy will also be a big driver for that.
Let's talk about the decentralization a little bit. Markus Krebber, may that be even threatening your business model? Because what you do until now, if I understand it right, you have huge plants that provide energy, and the energy is by the grids and the network transported to where it's needed. And if I understand what Karsten says right, then there might be many more production sites in the future. And maybe, is that a threat to your business model? Will each factory maybe have their own hydrogen electrolysis and no need for to buy energy from you and your plants anymore?
We don't see it as a threat. We think that both parts are needed. You need a lot of decentral production. Think about your solar roof at home together with a battery, I mean, intelligently managed. That is definitely a big piece of the puzzle. And also when we go to the heating sector, how we solve the problem of decentral heating. But when you look at the sheer amount of electricity which is needed in future, also when you think about the electrification of further sectors like the transportation sector, it cannot be produced only locally. Then it also comes to the question, what is in the end cheaper? Because, I mean, somebody has to pay the bill. And of course, the very central installations currently in PV, but we will also get there with offshore and onshore, are definitely much cheaper in the end. And if there is space, and that is more the limiting factor, if we have enough space, I think we should build as much as possible at lower cost centrally. But we still need all the decentral installation because otherwise we don't produce enough green electricity. So we don't see it as a threat. We clearly see that the market will become much more fragmented. It will change our business model a bit. So we are not so much focused on certain countries. We do offshore globally because we want to employ our knowledge and also into other markets. But there will always be a significant space for central energy production.
Mm-hmm. And maybe this question goes to Karsten and Tim. Do you think the whole market in Germany, in countries like Germany, will still be growing, or will we get to the point where energy will be saved and we will need, in the bottom line, less energy because heating is more efficient, we make use of what we have more efficiently, and like public and private transportation needs less energy in the end? So is there a ceiling to the market, or will it grow forever and ever?
So there are different scenarios. The most likely scenarios, let's take 2030, is that we will see an increasing demand overall in electricity. And let's assume also GDP growth. So there is generally, from a gross perspective, a likelihood that we see increasing energy demand. Just think of data centers. Data centers in 5 years from now will consume 15% of the global electricity. So there are massive usage increase and drivers for that. The balancing impact will be energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. So despite the fact that we see increasing demand, machines will become more efficient. We will deploy better technology when it comes to heating, low temperature grids, etc., to reduce the energy consumption. And this is in the range of 20 to 30%. And what we see today, when you deploy just from an energy efficiency perspective, modern technology, you see easily 30 to 40% reduction of energy usage. So overall, there is more energy need compensated by the fact of energy efficiency. So net, despite electrification of the mobility sector, we will see a flat profile. But a lot of work needs to be done to get there.
Mm-hmm. So, Tim, would you go with that? Would you say among like flattening, more energy needed for conferences like ours, for electrical devices, for computers, etc., and energy saved on the household and also public transportation side?
I would say generally, yes, I would agree on the primary energy use level, definitely. But for sure, we will be seeing increases and decreases over time and also between different energy sources. So we talked about electricity and other energy sources. In the end, in some, I agree, if we do a good job in terms of real-time optimization and not wasting resources, use efficiently what we have, then we'll manage to keep the energy demand stable, although new applications and services demand lots of electricity and energy.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at the political framework a little bit. I would like to ask all three of you really, if the ideal of the politicians has come true so far. They have been saying in Germany over years that German industry and German companies have a kind of first mover advantage. They put on more and more restrictions. They said, let's move out of nuclear energy, let's cut off the coal in foreseeable future. But that will unleash a process of innovation and make German industry and German grid providers, power providers and others become the leading of the world. So has this story, in your opinion, let's start with Markus, come true so far?
I think what we have to acknowledge is that we have made significant progress in Germany. I mean, look at the sheer amount of fluctuating renewable energy the system can absorb. And of course, everybody is now trying to cope with this system, us on the generating side, but as we have heard from Karsten, grid investments, and from Tim and new devices, that everybody is now starting to heavily look into the problems caused by the intermittency and how to solve it best. So I think we have really made significant progress. I think on the other hand, the dream has not become true because the costs are very high. And we are also seeing that we reach the level where the acceptance is fragile. I mean, not only that people don't want the investment in their backyard, and we are not only talking about onshore wind, we are also talking about the hydrogen network we need to build, network transmission investments. We always have the problem, nobody wants this in this backyard, but everybody knows the investment is needed. And also where we see problems is with the bureaucracy. I mean, things are not as fast as we need to move in order to really replace the old energy sources, coal and nuclear, because things take too much time. I mean, it takes sometimes 5 to 7 years to get the permit to build an onshore wind farm. That is too slow to get it done. So I think there are still things which need to be done. I would see the direction is right, but we need to get further support on the short-term implementation side. We need to deal with the problem of local acceptance. We need to deal with bureaucracy, but we also need to think about how to ongoingly incentivize private investments into the energy transition. I think no state money is needed. If the remuneration framework, the regulatory framework is good, I think enough private money is mobilized. But also there, I see some question marks.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Karsten? You deal with the end consumer who has to have the acceptance for rising energy prices on the one hand, but also for, as Markus put it, wind and grid in their backyard. So what do you make of it?
Well, I think, as Markus said, a lot has been achieved, but the next decade, I think, is going to be decisive. And as I said, another 30 to 35% CO2 reduction just in 10 years is a massive undertaking. And the challenge will be to manage this transition, at the same time also answering the question how to preserve industrialization in Europe. And I don't think this is an easy equation. What it needs, I think, is a very good political framework that allows It's open to technology. Technology is actually much more advanced than people think. Secondly, it requires an enormous amount of investments. And that's why I'm a great fan of the Green Deal, especially in COVID times, that we use necessary infrastructure investment to accelerate this necessary transition. And let me be also clear, it requires politics, but it requires all stakeholders. It requires all of us, myself, me as a consumer, to make this change happen. As a matter of fact, changing an infrastructure like a complex system, like we have in energy, grown over more than 100 of years, is nothing to do with just one silver bullet. It requires lots of different measures. It's not just a national thing. So I always hear Germany. We need to think European. And I think we need to make sure that all stakeholders play their role in this change. And it starts with every single industry. How do you change the energy system to have green energy to produce in the future? How do we change cities? How do we rebuild cities? This is one of the biggest infrastructure questions we have to answer as societies. And yes, that also costs money. And I think we need also the conviction of societies that this comes at a cost. We can't have it all at no cost. And I think this is something we need to also translate, because it's important for the future of next generations.
Karsten, I can hear that you're fond of the Green New Deal, and I imagine it's also because it gives a level playing field in Europe as far as rules are concerned, which makes it, of course, easier for a German company if you have a level playing field. But one question maybe towards openness towards technology of politicians. In Germany especially, but in Europe also, there has been a very big focus on electrification for years now. And all of a sudden, the buzzword of hydrogen comes up. Now, hydrogen is the next big thing. Would you think that, Karsten, we have been too much focused in one technology by the politicians now, and there should be more openness to start with?
Well, I think the debate is actually going in the right direction, is around openness. As a matter of fact, hydrogen in the end, also about electricity. It's just in a way a storage, as in gas form, of energy that would produce in the first place through wind, for instance. So in the end, it's also about electricity. And I think the future, without any doubt, because of the renewables, will be more electric. And the key question we need to answer is, which role does gas play? This transition can only work, that's my strong conviction, only through gas, and hopefully having a clean gas at the end being hydrogen. That's why I also think necessary investments and research has to happen in hydrogen to be ready in 10, 15 years from now. So yes, the world will be more electric. And I also believe we need an answer to the intermittent question, and that is gas and hopefully hydrogen.
As a storage capacity, which helps us really with...
Absolutely, and has different applications and has a lot of advantages, also comes with challenges.
Mm-hmm. And Tim, as far as policymakers are concerned, talking in advance, you have reported about red tape and the trouble that it can pose. Maybe you want to give the example of the smart meter, which you told me was coming a little too late and a little too outdated. Tell us what this meter is about and what it should be and what it finally is when it's on the market.
Yeah, I think that's one of the bad examples. Generally, I think I agree with Markus and Karsten that we have very good initiatives on the EU level, for example. But yeah, the smart meter gateway rollout topic, I think everybody here in this conversation is knows this topic. I think that's a very good example for too much bureaucracy and really too slow regulation, because I think in Germany we spent years, almost a decade, to prepare this first smart meter rollout. And as the word says, this metering of energy data in different buildings should be smart. But finally, I think we see now the start of this rollout, but the technology, as the path to the rollout was so long, is actually outdated. So When you would construct or design a smart meter today, Karsten mentioned it, we have so good technologies at the moment, you would probably do it differently to be able to take over the current challenges in this energy transition much faster. So I think that's one of the bad examples, but I think we will also manage to cope with that in the future.
Well, thank you, Tim. We have a few minutes left, and I would like the audience to take away maybe one vision or maybe 3 different visions of how the future of green energy could look like. Maybe let's go from big to small and hear what you think, the 3 of you, the future of using energy, of living energy, of producing energy will look like. Markus, would you like to start? What are the major plans we will see, maybe, let's say, 2040, and where will they be located, and what kind of energy will they produce?
When you go back 10 years, or you are now asking a 20-year question, if you go back 20 years, nobody would have imagined how the world looks like, the energy world, the electricity world. So we have made significant progress. So we should, by all the challenges we have in front of us, not underestimate how innovative mankind is when they really focus their initiatives to getting a problem solved. So I'm pretty optimistic that by 2040, we have definitely solved the carbon neutrality question for the electricity sector. We have also electrified significant parts of other sectors. Maybe the remaining open question is, how do we get to 100% CO2 reduction for the energy intensive industry? But we should also focus the initiatives now on the next steps. So I think with also the discussion where I would like to come back on technology neutrality or technology openness, I'm not sure whether that really plays to our benefit, because we need to get significant investments in technologies to get also the cost reduction in these technologies. And when you go back into history, energy policy was always a question of geopolitical interest and security policy. So all big energy shifts we have seen into coal to become independent, into nuclear, building gas pipelines to Russia, and now into renewables, were always political decisions focused on a specific technology. And we have the technology in front of us. So what I would like to see, instead of discussing whether 60% or 55 or 70% target in 10, 15 years is done, that is not relevant. Relevant is that we get the specific measures in place, and we all know what needs to be done. Maximum renewable build out, investment in smart grids, getting electromobility done, and then also an incentive framework for hydrogen. And let's more focus on the immediate next steps and not on discussing long-term vision, because the technology to solve the problem is there.
Okay, no big vision changes. We have all the technology at hand. Karsten, you have maybe a brief minute to add to that. Yeah. If you have another vision.
I'll do my best. 2040, I can see a hybrid world where we have big wind farms, big solar farms, hydrogen storages, but equally a very decentral world. Every roof carries a solar panel, small wind mills, industries having local production of electricity, heat, and cities, city quarters using their own energy. That's the world I see. And I think the next 10 years, what's as important is, if you run a business, I think energy for all of us plays a much more crucial role. So how do you make sure when you produce today in a country that wherever you produce on the basis of clean energy? And we also need to answer the question how we rebuild our cities energetically. And all this requires massive investment in energy, say, production, but equally into a very smart grid that manages this very complex world using data and software. And that's the future.
Thank you, Karsten. So Tim, the last minute is yours. Your vision maybe of us living in a smart home and energy in 2040.
Yeah, thanks. So when I dream of this new energy world, I think PV shouldn't only be on the rooftop, it should be integrated in the glass, in the surfaces. I think I would love to see that electricity is a product where you and I or my neighbors talk about as an emotional product, which isn't today. and that we compare who's more renewable, who's more self-sufficiently, that we compare the efficiency of the EVs we have. And in the end, of course, I need to say that I hope that communication standards will be much better than today, which would allow a high degree of digitalization, real-time optimization of production, consumption, storage. And when we achieve all that and control multi-million assets on the low voltage level, I think our economy definitely will save billions of euros, which can be invested in infrastructure in other areas and also social purposes. So that's my dream.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. Let's enter the competition and in who's more efficient and who's using energy more efficiently, and let's see what the future brings. Thank you three for discussing with me, and I think we will go on in our program now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.